Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. Today's topic is on precautions lawyers and legal practitioners need to take in the wireless world. So this was another topic that was recommended and suggested by our followers on YouTube as well as our clients. And this was to talk about, the real subject area was to talk about the mobility aspect of businesses today, and especially talking about the wireless world that's out there. We're talking about the Wi-Fi's of the world, where you're now connecting to the internet to conduct your day-to-day business, and this could be for both personal as well as for business data that's being involved in the transactions that happen across using devices, right from your mobile phones to your laptops and even iPads and other smart devices that we are privy to today. All these devices, regardless, are still utilizing a wireless network capability. So you go into Starbucks, you go into your second cup, you're still connecting to a Wi-Fi. Not all of these wireless gateways, if you will, are secure. And we're going to talk about, again, precautionary steps that you could take as practitioners, as business people, as individuals as well, in many cases, be cognizant of what's out there. Okay? Like any other uLaw webinar, today's webinar does have an agenda. And before I go through it, I want to reiterate that today's webinar is not accredited for CPD. We will be submitting it later on for CPD credits because we believe it's a very important topic to discuss. But today's session would be yet another fun-filled uLaw webinar. Will not be accredited for CPD credits. We kindly request you to register for our CPD session that's coming to the end of the month. And it's going to be on everything practice management. Okay, but nevertheless, we're going to be talking about many things that we haven't discussed before. This is a relatively new topic in our webinar series. So going back to our agenda, we're going to quickly talk about some of the potential problem areas. Let's define them. Let's define what these potential problems are or can be. We're going to talk about having maybe a device policy, a mobility device policy, whether it's for your company or for your small legal firm. Understanding the consequences of lost and stolen devices. I guess it's easier if you were to do it before that happens. So this is a great opportunity to have a better understanding of what needs to be done if you do come across that consequence. Let's briefly talk about it, intelligent and smart use of the wireless networks as well as the devices that we use to get through those gateways. Location and the IMEI number. And finally, we're going to quickly talk about practice management and legal accounting considerations. Okay? So, to my first slide on potential problems, we had many weeks before had written out a blog on the potential issues that wireless worlds pose for each and every individual that access internet through a wireless world. Okay, but let's get started with maybe some of the basics. For one, the device may be stolen or lost. Okay, so once you have, let's say, some of these mobility issues could start with just a very pragmatic issue that you've actually lost a device that contains both your personal information and potentially could also carry very sensitive business data information. When you access the wireless world, the messages and the files that transmit through this, these signals are prone to be intercepted, especially if it's not secure. And it's a popular term called eavesdropping. Well, it's an English word, but it's now become a popular term in the hackers world, eavesdropping. You've often heard about having now smart wallets where you're avoiding people actually reading your credit card numbers using certain mechanisms through your wallet. So we're starting to see how technology is evolving to safeguard your interest, but it's really important to know that transactions, messages, and files, as they pass through these Wi-Fi networks, are prone to be intercepted in transit. You may unintentionally download malicious software, and this is one of the oldest tricks to the trade, where you actually visit a website either knowingly or unknowingly, and without you realizing there's malware or malicious software being downloaded to, let's say, your laptop. Now, as long as your mobile phone is not necessarily jailbroken, which is a term that we'll talk about real quick, as long as it's within, your Apple, Android, or BlackBerry's peripherals, and as long as it's not jailbroken, those platforms do secure your phone from such malicious softwares being downloaded, okay, to the greatest extent. But if you've jailbroken your cell phone, which is basically taking yourself out of that platform and now being able to control the overall operating system itself, then obviously you'll be prone to virus and malicious software as well. Hackers gain access to devices through unsecured ports while it's being connected to the internet. So if you're accessing a website, which is, let's say, not a secure port, which is not HTTPS, if it's just another www HTTP site, and if hackers for some reason are tapping on those sites, then you are obviously prone to your device that's accessing that website being hacked for data. And we just spoke about jailbreaking. It's a term that's used when you, as the end consumer or user, especially for your mobile phone, decide to create modifications. You have the opportunity to remove yourself off that overall platform. You're getting at the kernel level and having access to your phone to do whatever you like. Then obviously that's a complication you bring to yourself. So it's also called rooting in the Android world, and it's called jailbreaking in the iOS world. Okay, so as much as you like to avoid doing that, many times, and this is one of the common things too, you may end up connecting to an unsecured Wi-Fi network. Okay, so we do this every day. Again, these are precautionary steps. This is the reality of life. You are going to go to Starbucks. You are going to go to a second cup. You may have the need to connect through these not necessarily secure Wi-Fi networks. And if that is the case, Starbucks, I think, has started to secure their networks because they do ask you for your permission before you go in. But let's say you do connect to an unsecured Wi-Fi network, you do put yourself at that risk of data and identity theft. Okay? An identity could be right from who you are. It could also be the location where you are. And we've heard horror stories now in the social networks where people post pictures of them being at a club and having their homes stolen. People actually took that information, took that data, were intelligent enough to know that they're actually at the club, they're not at their house, and let's take the opportunity, maybe the risk of, stealing their house. So again, that's one of those oddball stories. But again, when you do access yourself to these unsecured Wi-Fi networks, you do put yourself at that risk. Again, things to know: what are the potential problems that can happen in doing so? Another big topic that our user group wanted us to consider and address is having a device policy. Now, a device policy is something that you probably come across within large organizations, business organizations, even government organizations. With the advent of technology and with the advent of individuals bringing their own devices to their workplace, the mobile device policy has become a big issue and has become one of the leading aspects of today's realities. If you're a small legal firm, if you're actually a one-man shop, again, there are opportunities for you to learn from these things, but you may not necessarily have an MDM or a mobile device management policy necessarily in place. Okay, but then if you do have colleagues that are collaborating, maybe these are some things that you want to keep in mind. Okay, so for example, who in your organization gets to have a laptop or a phone. And if he or she is actually bringing these devices, their own personal devices, what devices do you support? If this is a relatively old technology, a relatively older device, do you go ahead and support that? How do you manage browsers when you're now accessing a lot of your online data and work through the advent of browsers? It is really important to ensure that the browsers that these devices carry are not deprecated, okay, or unsupported, if you will. So the IE8s, the 9s, and the 10s of the world are not supported, and when they mean not supported, that also means that if there's a security hassle because of you using that browser, then they are not responsible. Microsoft would not be responsible for those things, and they don't necessarily cover those potential problems. How are costs to be covered? That's more from a financial perspective, looking at consumption limits. If you're having a data usage that's being shared across your colleagues, Rogers and Bell and all those different providers do provide business plans where you can actually share data, and this could be mobile data. So having that consideration is always a great part of the policy. And again, understanding what are the acceptable uses of the devices, especially if you're going to combine personal and work data. You want to ensure that there's a policy in place. You are obviously the commander-in-chief of how you apply those policies and ensure that it's followed. But a good example would be downloading the type of apps that you're doing through the iOS and the Play Store. Okay, so understanding that you don't want to necessarily download unacceptable sources of apps. Ensure that these are legitimate apps that you're downloading from these stores that are meaningful for both your personal and work use. Having a policy, regardless of whether it's small or large company, having a policy towards password and data backups. So if you're using an online management system, let's say you're using uLawPractice for your legal accounting software, ensuring that you understand the policies that uLaw provides for how it backs up your data. So you could go to our policies, terms and conditions, and you would see how uLaw would back up your data on a daily basis, how the data is very much in Canada. So those are things that you want to be aware of. And also the password protection. You know, you are able to have a policy and have a way of resetting your password every 10, 15 days. And you can change that as often. We have colleagues in our company who make it a point to change their password almost every week. And last but not the least, a big topic, and one of the topics that we're going to cover in our upcoming webinar, is about the encryption of your business data, especially your business data. A great example of that would be using, let's say if you use Outlook for your business email, you do have the opportunity to encrypt and use encryption keys for the business emails that you receive through Outlook. Okay, so that's an example of how you may end up encrypting business data and making that as part of your mobile device policy. Okay. Lost and stolen devices. Now, the first line says it all. Means the best time to think about this is before your device gets lost and not afterwards. Okay, so it's really not an afterthought. Obviously, you've had a friend or a family member who's gone through this. I might personally have gone through this process where I lost my phone in an alien country, and obviously with your mobile phone being everything that you close, right from photographs to data to maybe sometimes even passwords that you've saved, it's always a traumatic situation. So keeping in mind the things that you can do to control this situation and how you handle it is really important, part of the whole mobility aspect to your life, right? First and foremost, ensure that you have a password enabled in your phone. Very simple thing, but many times gets left out of because you think it's your phone, you really don't need it to have a password. Passwords today come in various formats. It could be alphabets and numbers that you type the old school ways, or as you probably know, you have the swipe passwords. Now, depending on the phone that you have, you even have, your thumbprint as a password. So iPhone 6 and above does facilitate your fingerprint to be taken as a password. Okay. Most modern phones obviously have the fingerprint access option. And again, you are the deciding authority of how you want to go about doing that password, but it's really important that you have a password for your phone. And it's equally important that you have a password for any device that you use, especially when you're using Wi-Fi networks and the wireless world, if you will, to access information. As much as fingerprints are a really cool and jazzy new way of managing these, the one thing to keep in mind that it's still not the most mature password protection policy out there. Really simple, pragmatic things as sweaty and soiled hands is just one of those examples that we've read and have come across, and it automatically actually leads to a backup PIN that you need to have in mind. If your fingerprint doesn't work, it's important that you at least have a plan so you can actually do it the old school way of typing in the number. Okay. Have a way of managing passwords, and this is something we discussed in our previous webinar for policies for passwords. Don't make it obvious. Make it simple. Even come up with phrases. Now, a phrase is a great way of ensuring you have a password that not only is hard to crack, but it's easy for you to remember unless you actually have a password manager app or a solution for that. So you have password manager apps as well as websites, which pretty much holds all your passwords, and it has one encrypted password, and that's all you have to remember, and then it takes care of all the other passwords that you need to remember for your world. If you're not using such apps, then phrases are a great new way of coming up with newer, longer, I would say, passwords that are hard to crack. Okay? So a phrase like, I enjoy a summer walk, or I enjoy my email. Really hard to be without an app. You can come up with your own phrases, but it's a great new way of how you can remember passwords. Again, fingerprints are a new cool thing, but we wanted to put it out there that there is such a thing as fingerprint theft, and that can always lead to that password being stolen. Okay, so it's important as you keep in mind with your phone, with your device that you're actually using for both personal and for business work, and many times if it's the same device, then it's very important that you keep in mind that it's password enabled and you've done everything to protect that, especially if, God forbid, it were to be stolen or lost. So how else do we access it? So what are the intelligent and smart ways that is recommended by the internets of the world, and based on articles that have been written on this topic? We've kind of taken the top 5 or 6 excerpts from so many of the articles that we've read that have been published on the internet. When you're using your laptop, especially if that's being used on a mobile device as well as a Wi-Fi network, it's important that you keep your operating system up to date. We have clients who still are on the old Windows XPs of the world. For some reasons, they've not upgraded. They could still be on an older version of the device that they use. BlackBerry, for the longest time, actually forced you to upgrade to the latest Android version of BlackBerry. So the older versions of that are still not supported. So be it for your mobile phone or be it for your laptop or other mobile devices, it's very important to be up to date, because it's a myth that updates only bring in new features. It is true that updates many times do bring new features, but many times what we don't see are these updates bring in what they call as patch fixes to known security vulnerabilities. Okay, everything is a software today, so is an operating system, and because of the time to market needs of certain softwares, these developers who actually publish software may actually have a known security vulnerability, and they felt that they would actually handle it in the next release. Okay, these are some things that we don't understand as consumers, so it's important that when you download that update, you read through the policy of what you're getting. It's very important that you read that the list of things that you're getting as part of that update. And obviously an operating system update to your laptop would also ensure that they protect those known security vulnerabilities. Again, a simple smart thing is don't necessarily download every app that looks fun. Okay, so we're going to go to the Play Store. That's a big part of our life today is understanding newer apps. There are websites out there called as Captera or Get App that give you insights into the most happening common apps that are being used for businesses. But there are also the links that you get on Facebook and LinkedIn and links that you get from friends about games and other apps that are fun to have. It's important you make that determination of what apps to download and what not to. Free apps don't necessarily mean they're free, because now you are prone to advertisements, and we're going to cover that a little bit later. Advertisements then lead to needing your location, which is a bit of a security breach as well. Someone knows where you are, exactly where you're doing this. Those are things that you need to be careful about and be smart about. Again, so don't download every app that looks fun, and only go into the ones that have a respected source. Okay, so the big top guys always ensure that they're secure, so that they're not brought into the press. Okay, App Store and Google Play ensure security every time you download an app. Stay away from questionable sites, and we've spoken about this. Unknown sites, or especially sometimes if you have malware in your software, that's going to allow you to have a lot of pop-ups. So ensure that you have the right patches on your devices, and again, be careful and cognizant of the sites that you visit, because these sites could have malwares that are downloaded behind the scenes without you even knowing it. In today's world, I'm not quite sure how pragmatic this is, but it's a recommendation that's being made is do your best to separate your business files from your personal files. So for example, if you are a legal practitioner and you use Gmail, do your best to have your business files or emails in a separate system and have your personal emails on a different system. And if you can, encrypt your business files. As we mentioned, Outlook is a great option where you can actually have an encryption key. And I'm just going to quickly reclaim. I apologize. It was just a quick, just going to reclaim control. There you go. I do apologize. Okay, so there you go. So encrypt your business files, back up your data, whether it's your business data or if it's your personal data, right from your photographs to even music files. Even it's important that you keep in mind and have a plan to back up your data. Your personal files, keep them in one location. Business files, if possible, have them on a separate account to be backed up. Again, Not sure how pragmatic it is, but it's a recommendation that as much as possible, resist the use of a public Wi-Fi, especially when you're dealing with sensitive data. Okay, so mobility is great. It's obviously it's the thing for today. We're bringing in newer apps. We're bringing newer technologies to have you access information from anywhere, anytime. But be cognizant of the types of networks that you are using to get access and control of the internet and the data that's out there. And again, resist the use as much as possible, the use of Wi-Fi, especially when it comes to sensitive data. For example, if you're doing online banking and, if you can, resist that of not using a public Wi-Fi to access your bank information. Very similar with your legal accounting. As much as it's out there to use this Wi-Fi on Starbucks, again, be cognizant of the types of content and data that you're using. Another big topic, and we spoke about this earlier as well, is the location itself. Now, I'm sure you've seen this within apps, and you've seen this within the newer phones, is that they do ask you for your location. So it says this particular app is actually looking to access your location. And you would find this most often within free games. So when you download a game, let's say the Subway Surfer as an example that we've provided, it's a free game that you download. You don't realize that it's, behind the scene, they are tracking your location. If you give them access to one time, and that's pretty much it. It's kind of stuck within that app till you uninstall it. They're not going to ask for it again and again, unless you've disabled it, and then they ask you every time. Okay? And then when they do ask you for that, what that really means is behind the scenes, they're taking that location and they're sharing that with the advertisement companies that are waiting to then advertise to you based on your location. So if you're in Toronto and they know exactly that you are, then they probably would send you an advertisement to a nearby pizza place. I know that sounds cool and that's very social, but especially if you're using devices that contain both sensitive data for both personal and business data involved, then it's important to be cognizant of whether you want to provide access to your location to someone who's not a trusted source. Okay? You may want to, though, on the other hand, provide information, depending on the situation itself, provide that location information to, let's say, a Google map. So let's say you're looking for directions. Google will ask you, can I take control and understand where your location is, right? So it's going to say your location, and it's going to draw you a map to wherever your destination may be. That's fine. That's something that you have to because you need to get to a place, and it's a trusted source. Google is not selling your data location, at least from what we know, to other third-party companies. Likewise, Apple. Again, going back to the case where your Apple device gets stolen, providing access to your location allows Apple to retrieve that phone. So there are good and bad reasons to why you should provide your location and you shouldn't. Okay? And as a quick thumb rule, every time you download an app or are being prompted with that question of, can I look at your location, or can I share your location, or can you give me information about where you are, again, do your best to disable that whenever and wherever possible. Okay? And this is more so important if you're using a public Wi-Fi that's not secured. So if you're actually at home and you're using, let's say, Rogers or Bell, and they may actually ask you for your location, many times it's something that's being used by third-party government agencies. It's part of their policy and it needs to be accessed. But if you're using a public Wi-Fi, it's not secure, and providing locations is not the most prudent thing. If you already know about this, then it's fantastic. But for those who have heard this for the first time, every phone actually has an IMEI number. It's a 15-digit International Mobile Equipment Identity Number, and that's what IMEI stands for. So how cool is that? Every device has its own unique number, almost like a VIN number for your car, that's encrypted or actually written or engraved in your phone. Okay, for those who know it, that's great. For those who don't know it, it's actually in the compartment that's printed inside the battery's compartment. You would actually see a 15-digit IMEI number. It's important that you if you haven't written this down, or if you don't know this, that maybe you take a second to write it down and save it in some safe place. And why would you want to do that, right? Storing the EMI number would be very beneficial when your phone is lost, because that's one of the first things that your Apple or your Samsung or your Android phone company is going to ask you for. Okay, you are going to need to provide this to your Rogers and your Bell if it's stolen. Okay, and it's harder to get it. I mean, probably a first Rogers bill will have it, or your Bell receipt may have it, but then there is really your bills would not have it after that first bill. So if you don't have it, then it's a lot harder to get it. But having that handy, knowing what your IMEI number is always handy. Now, it has its own restrictions too. Okay, so the IMEI number is part of the GSMA database, and these are countries that have a bit of a sharing within these different carriers. So if you're with Rogers, you have Roam Like Home, where there are certain participating countries that share this whole GSMA EMI database. But that's a great example. If your phone's stolen and it's in China, then the chances are you're not going to be able to track your IMEI in that country. Okay, so that's, again, we wanted to talk about some of the aspects to security and some of the nuts and bolts of it, and that's why we brought this up. So IMEIs can be blacklisted, rendering the phone almost useless with just 911 access to anyone who's basically stolen it. So that's a great thing. So if somebody's stolen it and they're in Florida, then your carrier can actually disable that entire phone from not being used. So it's not being misused, unless it's in a country like China or Russia, where the whole IMEI database does not present itself. Last but not the least, the IMEI can also be used to trigger an alarm when the stolen device is reactivated. Okay, so let's say somebody stole it, and for whatever reason, you find that it's been reactivated, right? There's actually an app that sends you an alarm. And Apple is really cool with this, that they actually track your IMEI and they know it's been reactivated, and they're able to send you an alarm or trigger an alarm that alerts you of this is where your phone's being used right now. Okay, so moving along, maybe one of the last slides in my conversation today, and I'm hoping to have a lot of questions come up as part of today's webinar. What are some of the practice management and legal accounting considerations that you may want to keep in mind when considering mobility, while considering the wireless networks, and considering the fact that you want to be anywhere accessing data anytime using any device? Okay. Most of our legal professionals use a laptop or a mobile device, and many times it contains or carries information that's both personal as well as work related. Okay. And with the advent of technology, mobile phones, again, uLaw has its own mobile app too, and so does other products that you may use for practice management and legal accounting. But regardless of whether it's your laptop, your mobile phone, these devices today carry practice management data that you want to ensure is protected. Okay? Now, going back to understanding the policies that govern your data, go through our uLaw's terms and conditions, how secure your data is going to be, the promises that uLaw as a company provides to you, whether it's data being stored within Canada or the access to data at all times, the backups that they do every day. Likewise, you probably want to ensure that you're comfortable and you're knowledgeable about the security policies of the products that you use. Okay, that's the number one thing. The second thing, and again, we're going back to how you use wireless networks, resist the use of public Wi-Fi to access sensitive data. If there's one thing that you want to take home today after this webinar, it's this one line item, is resist the use of public Wi-Fi to access sensitive data. Okay, so you are a better judge of what that sensitive data is. If it's client's information, if it's banking information, those could be potential examples of sensitive data. Ensure that your laptop and your phones have a timeout. For those who don't know how to do that, whether it's a Windows machine or a Mac machine, you have the opportunity to get into your settings and then really lock your device maybe every 10 seconds or every 20 seconds. And you can do the same thing with your phone, where it automatically locks itself. So because you're using these devices to access all this information, which are very, very sensitive, especially when it comes to your own practice management. So ensure that if you don't have that timeout today, please go and set that in both your laptops and your phones, and ensure that there's a timeout, so that every time after those 10 seconds, if someone were to access that phone or your machine, then they would have to re-enter a password. Okay, so make it password protected and ensure that there are timeouts so that it locks itself out and somebody would have to present a password. And most important thing, lastly, would be, regardless of what apps you have on your phone, the ones that have sensitive data associated with it, especially if it's your bank or your legal practice management or accounting software, ensure that you log out of the app. As much as you want to stay connected, you always want to click on it and have that information available as to who you are. These are good examples of apps for which you probably want to retype the username password every time you access. Okay? So resist the use of public Wi-Fi. Ensure that your laptop and phone times out on its own within a specific time so that you can re-enter the password, and do your best to log out of the apps that contain sensitive data. So keep it very transactional. Okay? So if you needed to move that docket that time, do it, log out, so that the next time you're logging in, you need to present a username and password. If you need to log into your TD account, do it one time, because it's a really cool TD app right now to manage your finances. You could log in, do your work, make it very transactional, do it at your best at home where it's a secured internet connection, or any other place where it's secure internet connection, and then log out of the app. That way you're going to stay secure, and even if your phone's stolen or it's taken away, it's harder for people to get in. And even when you're using mobile Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi networks, it's harder for them to get in to those apps. Okay? So as a quick recap of everything that we've spoken about, I want to reiterate the agenda. So we discussed the potential problem areas when we spoke about the different aspects to the problems that you're going to potentially face with the advent of technology, the advent of mobility, and anytime, anywhere access to information, and with the advent of technology making internet access to you wireless wherever you go. Okay? We spoke about having a device policy, whether it's for yourself or your team or your company, ensuring that there are certain policies and standards that are set and are followed. We spoke about how do we, be proactive in understanding how to deal with the situation of lost and stolen devices. A few examples of the intelligent and smart use of devices, especially when it comes to using internet on a wireless system, on a public Wi-Fi, if you will. We spoke about not necessarily giving away your location. We spoke about the importance of the IMEI number. And last but not the least, we looked at a few considerations, especially resisting the use of public Wi-Fi, and I say that many times, as well as ensuring that you log out of some of these newer, cooler apps that do carry sensitive data on your phone. Okay? And that's all that we wanted to cover in today's webinar. I know it's wanted to give enough time for our audience to ask any specific questions that you may have. Now, our next week's webinar is going to talk about, and the reason we did this week was also so that we present a real-life example of uLaw's mobile app. It's one of the newer technologies presented by the uLaw company. So we have a uLaw mobile app, and we're going to be demonstrating it next week in our webinar. And that's part of why we wanted to talk about this particular webinar topic. For those who don't know uLawPractice, we are a Canadian legal accounting and practice management software, and we welcome you to visit our website at uLawPractice.com, and we do offer no obligation 30-day trial. Okay? So I will open the floors, and kindly do use the chat window to ask any questions that you may have. Okay, so it's an interesting question. So we have someone asking us, are you suggesting that we never use public Wi-Fi? The quick answer is no. I mean, it's not practical or pragmatic because it is what it is. We're out there, and Wi-Fi is necessary, and you do have to do that. I think the quick answer is be sensitive to the type of data and the type of transaction that you intend taking place across that Wi-Fi network. Okay, so if you're accessing your Facebook and, if it's a little bit of that social aspect to it, that's fine. If you're sending emails, those types of things are okay too. But if it's, in our consideration, anything that's related to dollars and anything that's related to sensitivity and the trustworthiness of the data, you want to make sure that it's well protected and you're cognizant of that. So yeah, never say no to public Wi-Fi, but be careful about what you do with that Wi-Fi. I think that we had an email question that our support staff has written to everyone. Yeah, we did speak about the blog. uLawPractice does provide blogs on a weekly basis, and we do have webinars that we have on a weekly basis as well. So we highly encourage you to visit our website at uLawPractice.com and click on blog. I can bring that up right away. Yeah, so it's actually on your chat window as well. So it's blog.uLawPractice.com. We write blogs almost on various different topics, ranging from security, passwords, to legal accounting, practice management. So feel free to check us out. Another question we have is, how secure is uLaw, both on the app as well as the web? That's a good question. I mean, on the web itself, I can take that first. The quick answer is we are bank grade secure, so we're HTTPS and we're 256-bit encrypted, so it's as good as your bank's security online. And in terms of your app, we have our apps on the two trustworthy platforms only at this time. We have it on the iOS platform as well as the Android platform, and have gone through scrutiny by both these two different platform systems to have gone through their checklist of security clearance to be actually made through into the app world itself. And after which, going back to one of my topics is the product by itself is secure, that it ensures security through the protocols of access. But there's two other things that you can do to make it a lot more secure and safeguard yourself. One is obviously having a good password. uLaw passwords are always are not simple passwords. We enforce that you use complex password combinations. And from an app perspective, I highly recommend that even if it's a uLaw app, if you have it on your phone, that you log off or use our sign-off option after all those transactions. And you can do the same for your web version as well. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, we thank you for being part of our webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. And kindly do send us your comments and feedback and other subject areas that we may like to cover in our upcoming webinars. Thank you very much.